I didn't mean to look. Honestly, I didn't. But that morning, when I stepped out to water the plants, I caught a glimpse through her open kitchen window. My 50-year-old neighbor, Rachel, stood by the counter, her hair falling over her shoulders, sunlight tracing the curve of her neck. She was wearing a light robe, humming softly to herself. I froze. And then she turned, met my eyes and smiled. Not shy, not offended, just calm, knowing. "If you want to look," she said, "just ask." I swear I forgot how to breathe. That single line stuck with me for days. I'm Jacob, 38, divorced for almost 2 years. I moved into this small suburban neighborhood after my marriage fell apart, hoping for silence, for peace. Maybe even to forget what it feels like to care about anyone. I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't even looking for company. Rachel lived next door. A widow, people said. Quiet, graceful, the kind of woman who never tried to draw attention but somehow did. We started with polite nods over the fence, then small talk about weather or the new neighbors. She had this way of making ordinary moments feel like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. A week after that morning, she caught me struggling with a broken gate. "You're doing that wrong," she called out, holding a mug of tea. I grinned, pretending I knew what I was doing. "Then come teach me, neighbor." She laughed, a warm, low sound that somehow made the air feel lighter. She crossed the yard, took the hammer from my hand, and showed me how to fix the hinge. Our fingers brushed for half a second, but it was enough. Enough to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, that quiet spark you don't plan for. We started having tea together after that. On her porch in the golden evenings. She'd tell me about her garden, about her late husband, how she still talked to his photo sometimes. I told her about my failed marriage, how love had turned into arguments and silence. She listened, really listened, and when I'd finish, she'd touch my hand lightly and say, "You didn't fail, Jacob. You just loved the wrong person for too long." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. There was something about her calmness, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that grows from surviving it. She wasn't bitter, just honest, real. One evening, I brought over coffee instead of tea. She smiled, teasing, "You trying to change our tradition?" I shrugged. Maybe I just wanted an excuse to stay longer. Her eyes lingered on mine a second too long. "You don't need an excuse." That night, when I walked home, I couldn't stop thinking about her voice. Soft, low, steady. It wasn't desire that kept me awake. It was connection. That rare, quiet pull you feel when someone sees you clearly. A few days later, it rained hard. I saw her sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the storm. The lights from her house glowed warm behind her. I hesitated at my door, then walked over. She turned, surprised but smiling. "You'll get soaked," she said. "Then share your blanket," I replied. She laughed, moved it aside, and I sat next to her. The air smelled like wet earth and jasmine. The thunder rolled far away. "You know," she said softly, "people don't really listen to the rain anymore. They just hide from it." I looked at her, and before I could stop myself, said, "Maybe they just need someone to listen with." She met my gaze. There was no hesitation, no game, just that same calm honesty. And for a moment, neither of us said anything. The rain spoke for us. When I finally stood to leave, she caught my wrist gently. "Jacob," I turned. "If you ever want to look," she whispered, "just ask." I smiled, not because I understood what she meant entirely, but because for the first time in years I wanted to. And maybe that was enough to begin. I started waking earlier without meaning to. The light over Rachel's porch came on at 6, and I drifted to the fence with a mug in hand. She'd already be outside, hair up, tea steaming. We talked about ordinary things. Tomatoes that wouldn't ripen, a stray cat that adopted her yard. The friendship settled around us, safe, warm, risky. I told myself I was just being neighborly, fixing a screen door, carrying bags. She, in return, left notes, fresh scones on the porch, don't forget sunscreen, folded neatly. I hadn't been cared for in a long time. At the yard sale, I set up while Rachel arranged old records and a teapot she was ready to release. Mr. Harper wandered over, the kind who wears a grin like a badge. He looked at me, then at Rachel. "Didn't know you liked them young," he said to her, as if I wasn't there. "Careful, folks will talk." Rachel's smile didn't break, but her eyes did. Heat crawled up my neck. "We're neighbors," I said evenly. "And friends." "Sure," Harper said. "Friendly neighbors." He sauntered off, leaving a film I wanted gone. Rachel kept organizing, hands steady. "He talks because he's lonely," she said. "He thinks noise equals company." She lifted the teapot. "Take this. It needs a new story." On my porch, she let silence breathe. "I thought I was ready for that kind of comment," she said. "Turns out I'm not." "You don't owe anyone an explanation," I answered. She nodded, jaw tight. I opened the door, set the boxes in. When I turned, she was still there, fragile in a way I hadn't seen. "Come in," I said. "Tea." No audience. We sat at my table. The teapot sat between us. She traced the rim. "After my husband died," she said, "I found receipts and messages I wasn't meant to see. Everyone called me a saint for standing by him through the illness. I kept a straight back at the funeral. But I grieved two men. The one I loved and the one I never knew. I wanted to reach for her hand but hesitated. She spared me the decision, sliding her fingers to mine. "I don't tell people that part," she said. "They prefer one story, the clean one." "I'm not people," I said. Her mouth quirked. "I know." A knock. Mrs. Linda across the street, returning a pie plate. She looked from Rachel to me and softened. "You two okay?" "We're fine," Rachel said, and I heard steel under silk. When Linda left, the room felt honest. Rachel exhaled. "Let's make a rule," she said. "Let the neighborhood keep its stories, and we keep ours honest." "What's ours?" I asked. Her eyes met mine. "Right now, tea, hands on a table, and truth." I squeezed her hand. "Mine. I like mornings because you're in them." Color rose in her cheeks. "Then mine. I'm not afraid of my age, Jacob. I'm afraid of being treated like an explanation." "You're not an explanation," I said. "You're someone I want to know." I made sandwiches because she looked tired. She laughed at the crooked halves and ate each bite like a promise. When she stood to leave, clouds were gathering, the kind that hold rain and don't apologize. At the door she paused, our fingers woven at the threshold. "You're the first I've trusted in a long time," she said. "Don't turn that into a favor I have to repay." "I won't," I said. "I'll turn it into breakfast tomorrow." She smiled, leaned in, and pressed a light kiss to my cheek. Then she stepped into the gray afternoon and let the first drops fall. I stood there with the doorknob in my hand, certain the rain would teach us something if we kept listening. The storm that night came fast. Wind scraping the windows, thunder shaking the ground like an old memory you'd rather forget. Around 9, the lights in my house flickered and went out. A second later, I saw the faint glow of candles through Rachel's window. Then her shadow moved across the porch. A knock followed. "Jacob." Her voice was soft but trembled beneath the rain. "My power's out. I can't find the fuse box." I grabbed a flashlight and ran over, soaked before I even reached her steps. She stood barefoot, wrapped in a blanket, hair damp and curling around her face. "You'll catch a cold," I said. "So will you," she replied, half smiling. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and wet air. Candles flickered on the counter, lighting her face in amber warmth. "Fuse boxes in the basement," she said. "But it's haunted, so that's your department." I grinned. "I charge by the hour." "Tease your payment," she said, leading the way down the narrow stairs. The light cut across her shoulder, across the edge of that same blanket she held tight. The air buzzed, not just from the storm, but from something unspoken. When I found the breaker and flipped it, everything hummed back to life. She exhaled. "You just saved me from the dark." "I doubt you're ever really in the dark," I said. "You glow even in candlelight." She laughed softly. Flattery works better when it's not true. Then let me prove it is. She looked at me for a long second. Jacob, don't. Why not? I asked quietly. Because I don't want to mistake loneliness for affection, she said. And I don't want you to either. I nodded. But neither of us moved. Upstairs, the rain thickened against the windows. We sat at her kitchen table, steam rising from the tea she poured. Lightning flashed. She jumped slightly, and I instinctively reached across the table, covering her hand. I used to love storms, she said after a while, until my husband's accident. It was raining that night. I'm sorry, I murmured. Don't be, she said. I'm learning to like the sound again. Maybe it's time. I watched her trace the rim of her cup, her expression somewhere between peace and pain. You deserve calm, I said. Not noise, not ghosts. She smiled faintly. Calm's overrated. Sometimes noise is proof you're alive. The thunder rolled again. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting candlelight. Jacob, she whispered. I haven't felt seen in years. I didn't answer. I just held her gaze, the kind that says more than words ever could. Then, so quietly it felt unreal, she reached up and brushed her fingers against my cheek. If you want to look, she murmured. Just ask. My heart stopped. I'm already looking, I said, and I was. Not at her beauty, though it was undeniable, but at the life in her eyes. The scars, the hope, the quiet strength that drew me in. She leaned forward, slow, hesitant. Our foreheads touched first, then our lips, barely, softly, like testing a promise. It wasn't passion, it wasn't need. It was something gentler, healing. When we pulled apart, the silence between us was complete, almost sacred. She rested her head against my shoulder, and we stayed like that, listening to the storm. After a while, she whispered, maybe we both deserve another chance. I didn't answer. I just tightened my arm around her, feeling the warmth of her breath through the blanket, the rhythm of rain slowing outside. I stayed until the candles burned low, until her eyes began to close. As I stood to leave, she opened them again, sleepy but smiling. Thank you, she said. For what? I asked. For not running when I almost did. I smiled, pulled the door open, and stepped back into the rain. The night felt different now, like it finally had somewhere to go. The next morning, I woke to sunlight and a strange quiet. No rain, no thunder, just that heavy stillness after a storm. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But something inside me whispered that peace never stays long. I saw Rachel later that day, standing by her mailbox. She looked radiant, hair tied back, smile soft. But there was something else in her eyes. Hesitation. Morning, I said, walking over. She nodded. Morning, Jacob. About last night. She paused. We should probably forget it happened. Her words hit harder than I expected. Forget? I asked. It wasn't a mistake, Rachel. I know, she said quietly, glancing around as a car passed. But people talk. And I can't. She stopped herself. It's not that I don't feel something. I do. That's the problem. Before I could say anything, a black car pulled up. A man stepped out, sharp suit, confident stride. I recognized him from photos inside her house. Her late husband's friend, maybe, or not. David, she said, her voice too polite. You didn't say you were coming. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Saw your lights last night. Thought I'd check on you. Then he looked at me, slow and assessing. And who's this? Neighbor, I said evenly. Jacob. Ah, he said, extending his hand but not really meaning it. The helpful kind of neighbor. Rachel's cheeks flushed. David, please. But he cut her off. You always had a soft spot for projects, didn't you? I felt my jaw tighten. I think you should leave. He turned to Rachel. You really want your neighbors to start whispering again? She looked torn, her voice breaking. David, stop. He smirked, nodded once, and got back into his car. We'll talk later, he said before driving away. When he was gone, Rachel stood still, arms wrapped around herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "He's someone I used to try to love. After my husband, it ended badly." "Looks like it never really ended," I said before I could stop myself. She looked at me, hurt flashing across her face. "That's not fair." I sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry. Seeing him here after last night." She stepped closer, her eyes wet but steady. "Jacob, I need time. I don't know what I'm doing yet. With him. With you. With myself." I nodded, though it stung. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Days passed. We didn't talk. I still saw her through the window sometimes. Reading, watering plants, pretending not to notice me. I told myself to give her space, but every evening the silence pressed heavier. Then one Friday my friend Matt came by. "You look like hell," he said, dropping a beer on my porch table. "Let me guess, woman trouble." I told him everything. He listened, then said, "Jake, you can't fix people who are still bleeding from someone else's wounds. Let her go before it breaks you too." Maybe he was right. But when I looked across the yard and saw Rachel struggling with her garden hose, I knew I wouldn't listen. I walked over anyway. "Need a hand?" She hesitated, then nodded. Always, apparently. We worked in silence for a while. Then she said softly, "I ended things with David. For good." I looked at her. "Are you okay?" She smiled faintly. "Not yet, but I will be. I just couldn't let fear choose for me again." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were clear. "Jacob, I've lost people before. I know how it feels to build walls to stay safe. But every time you do, you keep out the light too." I reached for her hand. "Then let's open the windows." She looked at me for a long moment, then squeezed my fingers. "You're too patient," she whispered. "Or maybe I finally found something worth waiting for." That night, the porch light between our houses stayed on. I didn't know if it was an invitation or just a habit. But when I stepped outside, she was already there, tea in hand, eyes warm again. "Storm's over," I said. She nodded. "For now." We stood in silence for a while, the air smelling of wet grass and quiet hope. Then she said softly, "Jacob, thank you for not walking away. I tried," I admitted. "Didn't work." She laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't sound like she was guarding her heart. It sounded like she was starting to trust it again. Spring settled over the neighborhood like a quiet apology. The grass grew greener, the mornings warmer, and somehow Rachel and I began to move in rhythm again. Not rushing, not labeling anything, just existing side by side. The porch between our houses had turned into neutral ground. Her tea, my coffee, laughter that came easier now. One Saturday, she was trimming her roses when I walked over. "You're early," she said without looking up. "I couldn't sleep," I said. "Too many birds." She smiled. "That's the price of peace, Jacob." I helped her with the garden, watching how the sunlight caught her hair. She looked younger, lighter. "You've been smiling more lately," I said. "Maybe it's because you stopped looking so sad," she teased. Then, after a pause, "Or maybe it's because I finally let myself be happy." We spent that morning in quiet companionship, planting new flowers, sipping lemonade. It felt ordinary, and that was the beauty of it. After everything we'd been through, normal felt sacred. Later that day, we went to a small neighborhood gathering. Someone's anniversary party, full of familiar faces and predictable gossip. I saw Mr. Harper eyeing us as we arrived together, but for once, I didn't care. Rachel didn't either. She looked stunning, simple dress, soft curls, that confident glow that never tried too hard. When people began to dance, I hesitated. Rachel noticed. "What's wrong?" "I don't really dance," I said. "You said that about loving again too," she said quietly, holding out her hand. "One step at a time." I took her hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. We moved slowly, almost swaying more than dancing. Her head rested lightly against my chest. Around us, laughter and music blurred into something distant. "You know they're staring," I murmured. "I know," she whispered back. "Let them." I'm tired of hiding from happiness. When the song ended, a few people clapped, some smiled, others just watched. Rachel looked up at me and smiled. That small, knowing smile that started it all. The following week, I found her sitting on her porch, sketching in a small notebook. Planning another project? I asked. She looked up. No, just thinking about life. About how love isn't supposed to be lightning. What is it then? She thought for a moment. Rain. Steady, quiet, sometimes inconvenient, but it makes everything grow. I sat beside her, taking her hand. Then I guess we survived the storm. She leaned her head against my shoulder. We didn't survive it, she said softly. We learned to dance in it. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, I caught her watching me. What? I asked, smiling. You still look at me like you can't believe this is real. I can't, I admitted. But I'm done pretending I don't want to. She chuckled. You're impossible. Maybe, but you're here. She shifted closer, her hand resting on my chest. You know, when you first moved in, I thought you were just another man trying to fix things around here. And now I know you were fixing me. We sat like that in quiet contentment. No thunder, no words left unsaid. Just two people who had stopped running from what scared them. As night settled, I turned to her. Rachel, I said softly, I never thanked you for that first day. What day? The day you caught me staring. Her laughter broke the stillness, low and beautiful. If you want to look, she whispered, just ask. I smiled, leaning in, and this time there was no hesitation. Just a simple, gentle kiss that felt like the end of one story and the beginning of another. When we pulled away, she rested her forehead against mine and whispered, You know, Jacob, people will still talk. Let them, I said. They'll never understand the quiet kind of love anyway. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, we stayed where we were, listening, breathing, alive. Because love, I finally realized, doesn't always arrive with lightning. Sometimes, it's just the steady sound of rain, and the warmth of someone who never walks away.